I was 23 when this happened, living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in Dallas, barely keeping my head above water. Rent ate most of my paycheck from the call center, and at the time I didn't even own a couch, just a folding chair and a cheap mattress on the floor. Craigslist was my lifeline for anything I couldn't afford new. I'd already gotten a microwave off there for $10. So when I found a listing for a dark brown leather couch at only $50, I jumped on it. The pictures looked almost too good, like something you'd see in a showroom. And in hindsight, maybe that should have been the first red flag. But I was broke and didn't care. I emailed the seller, and he replied almost immediately. Said his name was Mark, told me the couch was in a storage unit just outside the city, and explained he was moving and needed it gone quick. His tone in the email was polite, but a little stiff, like he copied and pasted the words. Still, I convinced myself it was fine. The next evening, I borrowed my buddy's old pickup truck. I remember the ride being unusually quiet. No music, just me rehearsing in my head how I'd lift a heavy couch by myself without looking like an idiot. The address took me to one of those long, depressing storage facilities you see in movies. Rows and rows of metal doors, some dented, some with rust creeping up the edges. The overhead lights buzzed, throwing weak yellow light that barely touched the ground. The place was too quiet. No one else around. Just my footsteps echoing. I spotted a silver minivan parked near one of the rows. A guy was leaning against it, hands stuffed in the pocket of his hoodie. That had to be Mark. He looked like any other middle-aged guy. Mid-40s, jeans, plain black hoodie, forgettable face. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't feel like the kind of smile people give when they're genuinely happy to see you. It felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. He waved and motioned for me to follow, saying the couch was in the back. His voice was calm, steady, too steady. We walked down one of the rows, until we reached a unit with the door rolled up halfway. He ducked in first, telling me to come take a look. Inside, the place smelled strange. Not just like dust. There was a sour mildew smell mixed with something sharper, almost metallic. I told myself it was probably rust or spilled paint. Against the back wall was a tarp covering something big. He pulled it back and there it was. The so-called couch. My stomach dropped. It wasn't leather at all, just cheap vinyl with deep cracks in the seat, and yellow foam sticking out. Completely different from the photos. I started to call him out, but then my eyes wandered to the back of the unit. There were boxes stacked on top of each other. The flaps weren't taped, and clothes spilled out. Shirts, jeans, even what looked like a purse strap hanging over the edge. At first I thought it was just junk, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the sneakers sticking out wasn't empty. I could see the pale curve of an ankle still inside. It didn't move. Before I could process, I noticed something else. Just above the boxes, built into the wall, was a narrow door. Not a storage door. Not like the ones outside. This one was painted the same dull gray as the walls, almost blending in. No handle on my side, only a heavy deadbolt. While I stared at it, I thought I heard something. Faint at first, like scratching, or maybe a muffled thump. My brain tried to tell me it was just the building creaking, but every instinct screamed otherwise. I forced myself to sound casual, muttered that I needed to grab my wallet from the truck. He turned his head toward me, and his smile was gone now. His eyes were flat, calculating. He stepped closer, and I saw his hand disappear behind the couch. That's when I caught the glint of metal. Could have been a crowbar, maybe a knife, but I wasn't waiting to find out. I spun around and bolted. My shoulder smacked into the doorframe, pain shooting down my arm, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I could hear him behind me, heavy footsteps hitting the concrete, getting closer. My boots slipped on the gravel as I tore down the row, fumbling my keys like an idiot. I slammed into the truck, nearly dropping them, and yanked the door shut just as I heard his steps right behind me. I hit the lock, twisted the ignition, and floored it. The truck lurched forward, tires squealing so loud I thought they'd pop. When I looked in the mirror, he was just standing there at the end of the row, staring after me, not running, not chasing, just standing perfectly still, like he knew I wasn't coming back and that I couldn't do anything about it. I called the police that night, gave them the location, his description, everything. I even told them about the sneaker with the ankle and the strange door in the back. A couple days later, I followed up. But what they told me made me sick. They said the unit was empty. Nothing suspicious inside. No couch, no boxes, no man. Just empty space. Like none of it had ever been there. For a while, I tried to convince myself maybe I imagined more than I realized. Stress, bad lighting, paranoia. But deep down, I knew what I saw. And I knew the smell in that place wasn't something my brain made up. A few weeks later, late at night, I found myself scrolling Craigslist again. Habit, boredom, maybe some part of me wanted closure. That's when I saw it. Different seller name, different item this time. Kids' bunk beds, $50, must pick up tonight. But the background of the photo, it was the same storage facility, same row of doors, same dull yellow light. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I reported the listing right away, but by the next morning it was gone. And that's what keeps me up. I know that guy is still out there. I know I wasn't the first person he tried it on, and I doubt I was the last. Maybe the others didn't make it back to their trucks in time. And every time I picture that locked gray door, I wonder if there's someone behind it right now, scratching and thumping, waiting for a chance that'll never come. I've used Craigslist for years, usually for small things like helping someone move a couch or selling off old car parts. So when I saw a short ad in the gigs section offering cash for overnight house sitting, it didn't seem that strange at first. The post was bare bones, just said they needed someone to stay at a property overnight. Nothing to clean or fix, $200 cash on the spot. It felt sketchy but doable. And at the time I was between jobs and not in a position to be picky. The reply to my email came almost instantly with just an address. No name, no extra details. And the tone of it was weirdly blunt, almost like it was written in a rush. I drove out that night to a part of Ohio I'd never been to, where the houses sat far apart and the road lights grew fewer the farther you went. The property was a large 2-story place, old siding, broken shutters, piles of wood stacked against the porch, like some renovation had been abandoned halfway. A man was already waiting outside. He looked like someone you'd see at a bank, late 50s, neatly dressed. He didn't bother with introductions, just shoved an envelope into my hand, told me my pay was inside, and laid down his rules in this flat, practiced voice. Stay inside until morning, don't go near the basement. That was it. Then he climbed into a black car parked down the road and drove off without another word. The way he left so quickly should have made me leave too. But when I counted the bills, I couldn't bring myself to throw away that kind of money for one night. Inside, The house was stripped bare except for a couch, a lamp, and an old fridge humming in the corner of the kitchen. No pictures, no clutter, no life. It felt less like a home and more like a space waiting to be used for something else. For the first hour or two, I just sat there scrolling on my phone, eating chips I'd brought along, trying to shake the weird vibe. But close to midnight, I started hearing noises. At first, it was faint, like the floor shifting or pipes moving. But soon I realized it was coming from one place specifically, the basement door at the end of the hall. Every few minutes there'd be a dragging sound, then a dull thump, like something hitting the walls down there. I thought about what he said. Don't go near the basement. And at first I forced myself to stay put, telling myself it wasn't my business. But then I heard something that froze me in place. A voice. Faint, muffled, but unmistakable. A woman's voice. Crying. The sound cut straight through me. It wasn't the kind of thing you could mistake for old plumbing or a raccoon. It was pleading. Choked sobs mixed with words I couldn't quite catch, except one that was clear as day. Help. My first instinct was to bolt, but my legs carried me to the door instead. I pressed my ear against it, and there it was again, desperate and human. My hands shook over the bolt. Every rational part of me screamed to leave it shut, but I couldn't. I slid the bolt free and opened the door. The basement was almost completely dark, except for a small window near the ceiling, letting in a slice of moonlight. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete and something sour, like sweat. I crept down the steps, my phone flashlight shaking in my hand. And that's when I saw her. A woman was tied to a support beam with thick ropes, duct tape across her mouth, her eyes wide and wet from crying. She jerked when the light hit her, struggling to move, making muffled noises through the tape. I rushed down, ripped the tape off, and she started gasping that he'd kill her, that we had to get out. I cut through the ropes with the pocket knife on my keys, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it filled the whole basement. She could barely stand, her arms marked red and raw from the restraints. I slung her arm over my shoulder, and we stumbled up the stairs. Just as I reached the top and pulled her into the hall, the front door slammed open so hard the walls shook. The man was back. His silhouette filled the doorway, and in his hand was a length of wood, maybe a broken table leg, something heavy. He didn't look surprised to see us. He looked furious. His voice was low, controlled, and it chilled me more than if he'd screamed. He said I wasn't supposed to touch the basement. Then he stepped inside, closing the door behind him, like he wasn't about to let either of us leave. For a second, I froze, trying to understand. And that's when it clicked. He hadn't hired me to house sit. He'd set me up to sit here as cover, a warm body in the house if anyone came knocking, someone else to take the blame if she was found later. He was framing me. He lunged before I could think. I shoved the woman behind me and swung wildly with my flashlight. It cracked against his arm, but barely slowed him. We scrambled back toward the kitchen, tripping over the bare floor, knocking into the fridge. He swung again, the wood grazing my shoulder hard enough to send sparks of pain down my arm. The woman screamed, grabbed the lamp from the living room, and smashed it across his back. The bulb burst, plunging us into near darkness. That gave us just enough of an opening to shove past him and sprint out the side door. We ran barefoot into the yard, weeds tearing at our legs, and I didn't dare look back until we reached the road. When I did, the porch light flickered once and went black. No sign of him chasing us. We flagged down a pickup passing by, begged the driver to take us to the nearest police station. The woman was shaking so hard she could barely speak, but she managed to tell them she'd been missing for days, lured to the house by the same man under some pretense. She didn't finish explaining. The police promised they'd go straight there, but later that night when I called to follow up, they said the property was empty, the house stripped, the car gone. No sign of anyone. They found ropes and tape in the basement, sure, but the man himself had vanished. I still have nightmares about that night. Not just the part where he almost killed us, but the thought that I walked right into his plan. If he'd come home sooner, if I hadn't gone into that basement, maybe my name would be the one in the paper, the idiot who got caught in a crime he didn't commit. And somewhere out there, he's still free, probably writing another quick Craigslist ad, waiting for someone else desperate enough to take easy money. About 6 months ago, I decided to sell my old laptop on Craigslist after upgrading to a new MacBook Pro for work. The old one was still in decent shape, a Dell that I'd used for maybe 2 years, so I figured I could get around $800 for it to help offset the cost of the new one. I posted it with some photos and basic specs, nothing fancy, just trying to move it quickly. I got a few lowball offers that first day, but around 9 p.m., I received an email from someone named Blake Henderson who said he was interested and offered me the full asking price of $800. His email was professional and well written, not like some of the weird responses you usually get on Craigslist. He explained that he was a business consultant traveling through LA and his laptop had crashed during his trip. He had an important presentation the next morning before flying back to Chicago and desperately needed a replacement. What really caught my attention was when he offered an extra $200 if we could meet that same night because of his time crunch. $1,000 cash for a laptop. I was hoping to get $800 for seemed too good to pass up. He said he had a rental car and would be happy to drive to me since I was accommodating his urgent timeline. I live in Riverside, about an hour east of downtown LA in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's not the middle of nowhere, but it's definitely not the city either. Most of my neighbors are families who keep to themselves, and it's the kind of place where you don't see much foot traffic after dark. I'd been living there for about 3 years and never had any issues with safety. Blake seemed legitimate, and the extra money was hard to turn down. So I gave him my address, and we agreed to meet around 10:30 p.m. He said he'd test the laptop to make sure everything worked properly for his presentation, pay me cash, and be on his way. The whole transaction would probably take 15 minutes. He showed up right on time, driving a dark blue sedan that looked like a typical rental car. When he knocked on my door, I could see he was dressed professionally in slacks and a button-down shirt, carrying a leather messenger bag. He looked to be in his 30s, average height, clean cut, exactly what you'd expect from a business consultant. He was polite and apologetic about the late hour. "I really appreciate you accommodating my schedule," he said as I let him in. "I know it's late, but this presentation tomorrow is crucial for my company." He handed me a Starbucks coffee cup and said, "I grabbed this for you as a small thank you for the inconvenience. I hope you like caramel macchiato." I thought it was a nice gesture, definitely not something you'd expect from your typical Craigslist buyer. I set up the laptop on my dining room table and started showing him the basic functions as while sipping the coffee. It tasted normal, maybe a little bitter, but I figured that was just how Starbucks made them. Blake asked good questions about the battery life, processing speed, and software installed. He seemed to know what he was talking about and appeared genuinely interested in making sure the laptop would meet his needs. "Do you mind if I connect to your Wi-Fi to test the internet connection?" he asked. "I'll need to upload my presentation files tomorrow morning." That seemed reasonable, so I gave him my network password and watched him pull up some websites to test the speed. About 10 minutes into the demonstration, I started feeling weird. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired, since it was getting late. But then I noticed my vision was getting a little blurry, and I was having trouble focusing on what Blake was saying. I sat down on my couch, thinking maybe I just needed to rest for a minute. "Are you feeling all right?" Blake asked, but his voice sounded like it was coming from far away, even though he was sitting right across from me. I tried to respond, but my words came out slurred, and I couldn't seem to form complete sentences. The room started spinning, and I felt incredibly drowsy. I remember thinking something was seriously wrong, but I couldn't figure out what was happening. The last thing I recall is David's voice saying something about calling an ambulance, and then everything went black. I woke up on my couch around 6 a.m. with the worst headache I'd ever had. My mouth was dry, and I felt nauseous and disoriented. It took me a few minutes to remember what had happened the night before, and when I did, I immediately looked around for Blake and the laptop. The laptop was gone from the dining table. So was my new MacBook Pro that I'd left charging in the kitchen. My iPad was missing from the coffee table, along with my camera that had been sitting on the bookshelf. My wallet was gone too, though my car keys were still there. I searched the house thinking maybe I'd moved things around while I was confused, but everything valuable and portable had been taken. The front door was locked from the inside, which meant Blake had locked it on his way out. There was no sign of forced entry or any kind of struggle. When I tried calling the number Blake had used to contact me, it went straight to a voicemail, saying the number was no longer in service. The email address he'd used bounced back as undeliverable. Even his name was probably fake. I filed a police report that morning and gave them all the details I could remember, but without any real identifying information about Blake. There wasn't much they could do. The detective told me to check local pawn shops and online marketplaces to see if my stuff showed up for sale, but nothing ever did. I still don't know exactly what Blake put in that coffee, but whatever it was, knocked me out completely while he robbed my house. The whole professional business traveler story was just a setup to get inside and drug me without me suspecting anything. Now I only meet Craigslist buyers in public places during daylight hours.